Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I am Aubrey Stone, Vice President, co-owner, and Chief of Sales and Marketing at CyberTools. We are a managed service provider who helps businesses with cybersecurity and IT support. And we're here today to present on how not to become a digital hostage. None of us want to be in a hostage negotiation, especially in a digital a hostage negotiation. So today I have joining us Deshawn from ThreatLocker. Hi, Deshawn.
Hey, Aubrey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming. We really appreciate it. And Deshawn's going to help us. He's a vendor of ours, and as an IT support company supporting businesses with the growing concern of ransomware, we partner with a lot of vendors to help us protect clients. And ThreatLocker is one of the vendors that we trust to help us combat ransomware. Deshawn is here today to help us talk about that a little bit and also to give us a live demonstration. So that's going to be pretty exciting and coming soon. I also have Phil Horton with me here today. Phil is a CyberTools account manager. Hello, Phil.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. So let's start a little first by talking about what is ransomware exactly. So ransomware is a type of malicious software that's designed to block access to a computer system until a sum of money is paid to get access returned. Some of the major players you've heard of, the WannaCry, right? We've also got some real life scenarios that I'm sure you've heard in the news, read about. The Caesars Palace and Casino that paid $15 million to regain control over their network. The MGM Grand, it's funny enough, we were at an IT conference in Vegas right as the MGM Grand ransomware event occurred, and it was quite eerie there as you could not get to your rooms, and it was very crazy. And the United Health Group, even bigger one, right, where a subsidy of theirs was infiltrated with ransomware, and they ended up having to pay multi-million dollars in ransom in order to get back their data. And it really crippled the healthcare industry. We still have clients that are suffering from the effects of that ransomware attack today, because the insurance providers were so crippled for so long that now they're having trouble and are delayed in making payments to their providers. And so we have doctors' offices and things like that that we support that are having cash flow issues because of that ransomware attack. So very serious thing that can occur in your business. And they say that about every 10 seconds, a new organization gets hit by ransomware, and that 60% of the businesses that are compromised are out of business within 6 months because they simply cannot afford to be down that long. And in 2023, they reported 317.59 million ransomware attacks. And Deshawn, do you think we expect that number to be larger at the end of 2024?
Oh, absolutely. I believe it's just going
Yeah.
to keep growing. They're still making money, so they're going to keep doing their job.
Yeah, yeah, and AI has made the job easier. Nothing is working. I mean, it's kind of a game of cat and mouse, right? Like we're
Right.
always trying to get ahead of the bad guy, and then they're always making improvements on their process. And AI has given them a vector to make such improvements that the game has escalated.
Absolutely.
The ransomware attack lifecycle, I'm going to give you the real ABC version of all of this, and then Deshawn's going to get into the more specifics of how they look for and deliver ransomware, and then he's even going to give us a demonstration of it. So stage one, there is an initial stage where the ransomware is delivered to the victim's system. Unfortunately, in businesses, the weak links are the employees who fall victim to clicking on a link in a Google search that they think is real. Is this really Pandora? It looks like Pandora. Let me click it, right? Or the link that is in an email that looks like it's coming from the CEO. One of the things that are really challenging, that is really challenging for us in today's day and age, is that AI has made it so much easier for them to deliver their messages without it looking inauthentic. It used to look, the domain name would have gobbledygook on it. It used to have problems with grammar and spelling, and the visual effects of the delivery of these links were, you could tell. It's very difficult to tell now with the invention of AI and them feeding that content in there, and it's spitting it right back out. So the next stage is the execution, and that's when the ransomware is actually executed on the victim system. And is it true, Deshawn, that usually ransomware can go undetected in your environment for quite some time?
That is correct. It can lay dormant where your tools aren't scanning it because it's not running. And it just sits there waiting for the right moment, a holiday, sometime where you're not at your machine to notice it really running.
And then the third stage is when they encrypt that data and you can't get to it. And, the last stage is the extortion. That's when they ask for the big price tag in order for you to get your data back. The common ransomware delivery methods, again, I'm giving you the ABCs. Deshawn's going to go into the real nitty gritty, but phishing emails are one of the primary methods used to deliver ransomware. Exploit kits, these are malicious toolkits that take advantage of vulnerabilities in software, applications, or operating systems. So when we tell you to please do your updates, we're not saying it just to be a pain in your butt. We know updates are pains. We know they break things sometimes. We wish that all of the major players in the game, like Microsoft and Epson printers and Hewlett Packards, would all get together and say, hey, we're going to deliver some updates today. Let's make sure they all work happily together. But that's just not the facts, right? Nobody can do that in how fast-paced these things go. And the reason you need to do those updates and stuff is because if there's a vulnerability and it's known and it's not patched or taken care of, that is one way that they use to get ransomware into your system. And then the last way that they do it is through remote desktop protocols. If you're one of my clients, you've probably started hearing us talk to you about MFA and safe ways of remote desktop getting access to your network, and this is why, right? Because these are the typical attack vectors. Impacts. What is the impact on a business when it is affected by ransomware? Well, there's financial loss. Usually they're demanding some sort of payment. There's reputational damage. When I said MGM and I said United Healthcare, everybody probably has an idea or a picture in their mind that they've placed based on the things that they've heard, right? So your operational disruptions also can erode your trust and harm your business reputation. You also have the operational downtime. There's going to be loss of productivity, customer service, operations, and all of those things affect your business. Now, there are some security measures that we can do, right? On your email and web security, we can do some network security measures and some endpoint security measures. But really the reason I brought Deshawn on here today was to talk to us about how him and his team began to think like a hacker and reverse engineer what they do to try to come up with a solution that helps stop what they do. And we all have to think about what the hacker wants, which we already know. They want dollars and money, right? And what has value? Well, data has value. And how do they get to your data? And that's what Deshawn is going to start going over for us. And one thing I do want to impress is that a lot of small and medium-sized business owners will say, I'm too small. They don't want my data. So Deshawn, I hope you're going to really talk about why that's not true.
Yeah.
Because they want whatever's easy. We're talking about teenagers sometimes, and
Yep.
young men that are in their 20s, women, men. I mean, young people that are doing this. They just want a paycheck. They don't care how they get it. I'm going
Exactly.
to stop sharing and I'll let Deshawn take over here, and he's going to get into this a little bit further for us.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen over here. And I believe that is up. Can you see that on your end, Aubrey?
I sure can.
We can.
Okay, perfect. So just picking up where Aubrey left off, and that was a great point that she made, that no one is too small to get attacked. You have data, you have credentials, you have machines. At the very least, they want to use your machines to start attacking other people. So how can they get that data? How can they get that access? And that's by your servers and your endpoints, and it's by weaponizing those against you. Again, either to get your data or use them as a weapon. Now, they're typically going to do this through things like our traditional viruses, our adware, our spyware, rootkits, Trojans, keyloggers, all the way up to ransomware. These things are going to keep growing. They're going to get more sophisticated as time goes by because as they get more sophisticated, so do we. When viruses came out, we invented McAfee. We had our antivirus tools to look for those viruses. We had adware, spyware, rootkits come out, so we started getting our next gen antiviruses. So, as Aubrey kind of started the meeting with, we're always going to be chasing after the threat actors, trying to come up with something to essentially whack the mole to stop them from deploying this bad software in our environment and it being weaponized against us. Now, to that point, we're going to eventually run up to things like IP scanners, like valid software in our environment that can be used by you guys internally for good things. Your IT teams might need to go in and discover a network, see what's going on in this environment. But just as a good person can use a tool like an advanced IP scanner, so can the bad guys. They can use that against you to again discover your network, find those vulnerabilities in your network. And the hard part about this is your detection tools, your antiviruses, your EDRs, they'll look at something like IP scanner and say, hey, that's good. They'll look at something like your backup software and say, hey, that's good. I'm just going to go ahead and let that run. Now the problem is it might not be your backup tool that's running on a server. A bad guy might take another backup tool, something that an EDR says is perfectly fine, and they might use that with a pre-configured package to export all of your files in a backup to their servers. And now they have successfully exfiltrated your data with something that was good, something that went undetected by one of those traditional tools that we've built and we've become accustomed to protecting us. Now, with that, we see the point here is that all of this is just software. Malware, viruses, ransomware, advanced IP scanner, backup software is all just software. So we need something that doesn't just say, okay, I'm only looking for the bad guys. And that's where ThreatLocker comes in. And it simply allows what you want and need and blocks everything else. So your IP scanner gets to run, your backup tool gets to run, not just any tool simply because it's not bad in your environment. So that's going to be kind of our bread and butter here is zero trust or least privilege access. I'm only allowing the tools on my machine that I actually need, nothing else, which is a lot better than hunting for those threats and then responding to them after something is detected on your machines here. Now, we're going to make that pretty easy as well because we understand there may be things that change in an environment. So while we don't want the bad things spinning up and running on your machines, we do want you guys to still be able to work, install new tools as needed. So we do give you some nice graphical boxes here to make things easy for you while still implementing least privilege access. And we're going to make
Yeah,
that
and
easy on them. Oh, yeah.
if I may, Deshaun, we deal with these kind of alerts every day using this software in many of our environments that we support. It quickly generates a ticket in our system, or a phone call comes in saying, hey, I am trying to authentically run this piece of software. Can you check it out and let me know why it's being blocked? And we're able to get it put into place quickly.
Yeah. Exactly. And we try to make this easy because least privilege is not a brand new concept. It's something that's been around for a while, but it has been incredibly difficult to actually implement and manage. So we try to make that easy by putting your machines into a learning mode as soon as the agent gets installed. So we want to learn what that good stuff is. We want to learn what should you guys be allowed to do. And then once we know that, we then go ahead and start enforcing those policies, creating that allow list. Here's the good stuff that should be running in my environment, the tools that I allow to run here. Of course, ransomware is not going to be put on that list here. And then we even keep up with those definitions for you. So once you determine what's good, something like Microsoft Office, we're going to keep up with that definition of Office. So as those updates for Office come out, we go ahead and make sure those are accounted for. Things like expected change is more than welcome. If someone tries to install a malicious version of Office, well, then that is not going to work. That is not Office as we know it, and it's not Office as we keep up with it. So we're going to keep you nice and safe again, just allowing the stuff that you guys want and need on your endpoints to run and nothing else. So that puts us in a pretty good place there. So we have a nice block of safe software, of good stuff that we actually do want to run. Now, the problem is that threat actors have overcome that as well. with fileless malware and living off the land, where they actually go in and start weaponizing the stuff that we do trust, the stuff that is good in our environments here. So, like it says, they're going to leverage the vulnerabilities and the features in your software. So, there's unpatched vulnerabilities or even things that are good for a particular application. Something like the Felina vulnerability here, where the Microsoft diagnostic tool was actually weaponized against users. Now, for that, I have a quick video. It's not going to really be any audio here, but it just shows what that Felina vulnerability was able to do. And for those who don't know, essentially what it does is if a user runs a document with this vulnerability or that exploits this vulnerability, it's actually going to use the Microsoft troubleshooter here, the diagnostic tool, to actually go out and download the malware and then execute it on a user's machine. So things that are traditionally for good, things that we would have allowed through Microsoft Office, could then get weaponized against your users here. And while it's going to show to the user, hey, it's resolving your issues, it's actually opening up PowerShell here and running our command. So we see, haha, you lose here because this machine is now compromised. So that's an example of one of your good tools being used against you for something malicious. And here is just a little picture of that code that actually executed on the machine, obfuscated, so it's a little harder for your EDRs and antivirus tools to detect, and definitely able to run on your users' machines. Now, as you can see here, PowerShell was used in that attack, and it's used in 87% of ransomware attacks on most machines here. And PowerShell, if you don't know, comes built in to your Windows machines. This is on every single one of your users' endpoints, and typically it's not going to be disabled because you do legitimately need to use it for good things. Automation, patching, scripting, logging, plenty of good things, but it's also going to be what the attackers use. So for things like the 3CX vulnerability, that was going to be leveraged when that little 3CX DLL that got compromised, a good update, something that came from 3CX appeared to be trusted, went out to GitHub to download a payload and start attacking machines. So just examples of good things turning bad against you, and vulnerabilities in those applications, vulnerabilities that are going to be exploited, are going to lead to things like this: running executables, running ransomware, installing remote access tools or backups, exfiltrating data through that tool, through PowerShell, through your web browsers, through trusted tools there. So common misconceptions here are that your AV tools, your EDR tools, your detection tools are going to stop things like this. Now, that's a misconception because, again, these are examples of applications doing exactly what they're supposed to do, just not how you guys wanted them to do it in your particular environment. PowerShell is more than capable of moving files around, and that's typically fine until it starts moving files outside of your environment. Office, you want that diagnostic tool to be able to run. You want it to be able to pull components of Office from the internet to repair Office. You don't want it pulling malware and running it on your system. So again, things that EDR is going to say that tool is just going to the internet to do its job. Well, no, it's not. It's trying to attack you. And that's actually where ring fencing is going to come in, because by default, every single time you open software on your machine, it has access to everything on your machine. All of your applications, your files, the registry, the internet, limitless access to things it doesn't need access to. But what our ring fence does is puts a limit on your software. So once you have a list of trusted software, I want this to be able to run, ring fencing says, okay, well, now you get to control what that application has access to. So now Spotify does not have access to your backups anymore. It can no longer open PowerShell or command prompt or do things that it doesn't need to do, but it would likely do in the case that it was weaponized. So again, just showing you some of those examples there, Felina would have been stopped by that ring fencing component because by default, we do not let Office talk to something like PowerShell to be able to execute that command. Things like the 3CX vulnerability there, that supply chain attack, we would limit that access and make sure 3CX can talk to the phone server, but that is it. 3CX does not need to be able to establish connections to GitHub. Same thing with any of your other applications. We can limit that access. Again, if they do not need to get to other apps, things like PowerShell, they don't need to open your apps, they don't need to get to the internet, your backups, important files. So we simply limit that access by default, only giving it where it's needed. Same thing here, backups in that first example there, a backup tool, whether it's yours or another backup tool being weaponized against you, we can make sure it only has access to the directories you would like it sending backups to and not anywhere else on the cloud to be weaponized or held against you. Now, here's just a nice little protection pyramid here. Starting at the bottom, we have that human training. So this is kind of the base level that everyone's going to have. We're going to do our best. Groups like Cyber Tools are going to do their best to train all of the users. Guys, do not click on the link. It's not a real gift card. It's not a real chicken biscuit from Chick-fil-A. It's not what you think it is. And we try to do that as much as possible so that hopefully everyone thinks twice. They hover over the links. But when people don't do that, then we traditionally had our detection tools over here on the left side of the pyramid here. We had our threat hunting, we had our antivirus, our anti-phishing, our detection and response tools. Things that are looking out and saying, okay, you did click the link, you did fall for the trap there. Now something bad is on your computer. I need to find it and I need to remove it. Now, again, in the past, that was good enough. We would go in there and say, okay, we want the fastest EDR. We want the fastest antivirus. We want it, whatever is going to find the bad thing the quickest and get rid of it. Well, now, again, the malware has advanced. It's gotten so much quicker that even in that small time that it's able to run before getting detected and remediated, it's encrypting files. It's changing settings. It's locking people out. It's establishing persistence. So we need something better than reacting to the threats. And that is where ThreatLocker comes in over here on the control side. So far, I've talked about the application allow listing and the ring fencing. Really our bread and butter here. Again, just selecting this is what I want to run on my computers and nothing else. And then once I've selected the things I want to run, I'm going to limit their ability to reach out to the other things on my systems. But then we also extend those least privilege access controls to your storage. We also implement a privilege access management tool here with elevation control, allowing users to remove admin rights across the board. Again, keeping them from being weaponized, but still giving those rights out on a per process level here. So you can still get what you need or get done what you need to. We're not going to take away your ability to work, but we will take away the ability for your machine to be weaponized. We have our network control again, extending that to the firewall on your endpoint, and then dual factor authentication here, just to make sure you actually are you when you're completing certain tasks here. Now, again, just a little overview of that allow listing, very effective in stopping zero-day malware, really any malware there, because you have to explicitly put anything on the list if it's going to run. And I highly doubt anybody at CyberTools is going to put ransomware on the green list here. So it's going to inherently protect us from things like that, things that your EDR definitions don't even know about yet. Now, deployment management, again, not going to be hard. We're going to start you off in a learning mode where the agent does most of the work for you. We will learn your environment first and then work together before securing to make sure everything you need is allowed. And then we block everything else that is going to be malicious or an unwanted change in the environment. And then again, ring fencing there, just highlighting the ability to stop those zero-day exploits of your good software just from simply keeping them in their lane, making sure they're only allowed to do what they need to do. And being weaponized is not something that your apps will ever need to do. And then finally, the overhead here, a lot less than EDR, reduces IT costs here. And that's really just going to come from no management of those continuous updates there, those list of threats that come through that we're constantly managing and saying, hey, look out for that bad guy, and that one over there. We don't need to look for anything. We just need to say, I know this environment is allowed to run what it needs to run, and I can just go ahead and leave it alone. Now, here's just some different compliances that we've been able to help people meet and different things that we're, Homeland Security here, things that we're able to support, help out with this product, just different things that we're able to keep safe here. And then some of our compliance frameworks that we can help people meet as well. And then the common verticals that we see having to meet these different compliance frameworks. I can leave this up for a second just for people to take a little browse around this here. We're often helping people in the medical field, lots of different fields, lots of different verticals here, just become a lot more compliant with our tool. And again, that implementation and management is incredibly easy. Now from here, again, just giving a little overview of all these icons, or of these features here, but I'm about to go into a nice little demonstration of them. Now I'm going to keep it pretty high level, just showing you guys how this affects you at more of users as opposed to management side, which we'll take care of for you. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing that there and open up my little demo environment here. And just to get us started again, we make this easy right from the start. So as I mentioned, as this agent gets deployed to the endpoint, it is automatically deployed in learning mode, where we're going to go in and do all the work for you, learning your environment, the software, the drivers, all your Windows files here. And we're going to automatically create and deploy policies, which are simply rules saying this software that I've detected on these devices is going to be permitted to run. Now, we're also going to bake in a good bit of those things like your Microsoft Offices, your popular video communication apps, your popular web browsers here. But one of the most important things that you'll see on this screen here are going to be these little built-in tags. And that's again because we know that allow listing, whitelisting, it has existed in the past before. It's not a new technology. It was just a very cumbersome and burdensome technology, which is why a lot of people didn't implement something as effective as least privilege access. Well, with these built-ins, that is where we have our application team actually managing these apps on your behalf here. So now we're not going to run into that problem of, hey, my good software updated, it changed, now it's different, and now it's blocked. We don't want people running into downtime, and we don't want to increase the overhead on any IT team managing ThreatLocker. So with this built-in team, our application team, or with the built-ins, our application team manages that for you, just to keep everything nice and smooth on the user end and nice and easy on the IT side here. Now, we also have our unified audit here, which is a big hub of visibility within ThreatLocker. So this is going to give us a lot of insight as to what is running on machines both before and after they're secured. Now, although we are doing most of the work for you, again, just deploying those policies automatically, deploying the built-ins, even for special software, things that we've never seen before, don't have built-ins for, this portal is going to give us a bunch of insight into any of these items here. So we'll know not only what's running, but where it's running, what's calling files to run, what's creating them, who they're signed by, lots of details that we're able to use to build future-proof rules, making sure that all of your software that needs to run, whether ThreatLocker has seen it before or not, is going to be able to run now and in the future with little to no interaction on anybody's side. But again, it's not just going to show us this execution or this application data. From this single unified audit, we're going to have visibility of all of the application, the elevation, the network, and the storage activity on your machines here. So we'll be able to see reads, writes, movement, deletion of data, things like network traffic in or out, elevation activity, who is running what with what amount of privilege here on top of our application activity. Now, once we're comfortable with everything here, we know that you'll be able to run and continue to do your jobs as expected. Then we go ahead and secure the endpoints. Then enforcing this list, meaning if it's on this list, it is allowed to run. If not, it is instantly denied. And I'll give you a quick example of what that looks like over here on my user's secured machine, where Bob here has downloaded a good bit of things. Now, ThreatLocker does not care what Bob has downloaded. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be something from that free gift card link you clicked on, or something absolutely legitimate. All we care about is it already on my list of things that are allowed in this particular environment? So when Bob tries to run TeamViewer here, we can see that instantly gets denied. And that's not because TeamViewer is bad, and that's not because we're using the AV or EDR approach of, hey, let's let everything run, but then watch it. And if it's on a bad guy list, or if it does something we know is bad, then we'll stop it from running. Because again, that is too reactive for us. We don't want to just sit there and watch this giant growing list of big bad guys just to say, hey, look, that's ransomware running on your server. We should probably do something about it. We would much rather keep up with a very small list of applications that should be able to run in your environment, which blocks things like ransomware from running right from the start here. But sometimes you guys will need to change your environments. So for times like that, we give you this nice little pop-up here, letting you know, hey, it was us. We blocked you from running that. But if you did need to run it, you can go ahead and request access, which you'll get another pop-up here, another one of those beautiful ThreatLocker logos there. That can be rebranded if you guys don't love it as much as us here. But from this side, we see that TeamViewer is the application that was blocked. We'll let the user know, hey, this is remote access software, and if it's approved, it would have access to your files, the internet, the registry, and any other application on your machine. And then it also tells that user where the software was developed. So just some good insight there so you guys can make an informed decision. Do I really need to run this on my machine, or should I just go ahead and cancel this request? But if you feel like, hey, I really need this software, well, then you can go ahead, enter in a reason, let the IT technician know, hey, this is what I need to install, this is why, and then you go ahead and send that in. Now that can be responded to pretty quickly because that's going to come directly to the response center within ThreatLocker. We also have mobile integration, so techs can get these alerts on their phones and respond on the fly without even having to be on their machines. And then we also offer services to take some of the load off as well. So they would get this request in, seeing that you wanted to run this TeamViewer file on your machine. There's going to be different methods here that we have to vet this file and make sure it actually is a TeamViewer installer here, which we can see it is signed by TeamViewer. We can even run that file through VirusTotal, just do our due diligence and make sure this is something we should actually allow you to run on your machine. And once we've determined, okay, this is TeamViewer, I do want to allow this in this given environment, we can then just easily build out a policy saying, I want to use the team viewer built in so that as team viewer gets updates, they are still allowed as well. And I might want to just let this one machine run team viewer since it's the one that requested it, or this might be software that everyone needs to run. So rather than making all of the users submit requests individually, we can just quickly allow the workstation's users to all be allowed to run TeamViewer. And then we're going to come full circle here back to that elevation control component where we don't want to add extra work. We don't want text going to each machine where maybe all of the admin rights have been removed. So now we have a ticket for every single user that needs those admin credentials to install TeamViewer. Well, to make everything easier, but still nice and secure, remember, we're sticking with that least privilege access principle. We're actually able to give back those local administrative privileges here down to the process level. So instead of giving my users admin permissions that can be weaponized on their machines to open things like PowerShell or command prompt, I'm simply going to give my users 1 hour to run just this TeamViewer installer as if they were admins on their machines, limiting what can be weaponized on their machines here, but still allowing them to install what they need to install. So again, not taking anyone's privileges away, just kind of dulling the blade here of their endpoint. So now I'm going to go ahead and approve this request. We'll find that on the user's machine that actually submitted the request, they'll be notified and just letting them know, hey, you can now run that thing that you tried to run earlier, and we'll actually give them a link to run that same file again. So no digging through the downloads directory, no re-downloading things, just to go ahead and run that tool that just got approved. So nice, quick, simple, streamlined process here, especially when we have one of those built-ins. But we're not always going to have that. Sometimes users will need to run things that ThreatLocker's never seen before. So we have you covered there as well. We still want to make sure you're running good software. So for that, we have this unknown application that my user Bob wants to run again. He's saying that this is Google Chrome version 1.2.34, but I'm a little surprised it doesn't match my Google built-in, but I have a couple choices here. I can skip testing and just simply throw this user's machine in installation mode. Nice, easy, quick way to handle this. We place the user's machine in a passive state, unprotected, but watching what they're running. We can go ahead and learn what this application is that gets installed, package that up, and then deploy a policy to allow anybody else in the environment to also quickly run and install that same software, which is great. If you have a tool that everyone needs to run, amazing. We learn it once, we run it, everything's nice and smooth. Now, that's only good if we know exactly what the software is and we trust it. Now, if a tech just receives this request here, they're going to take a look at it, and we can see that this Google Chrome file here is not signed by Google. I don't have a big green certificate here. All I have is a message from Bob saying, I need this. Well, sorry, Bob, I kind of need to know what this is before I let you run it. So to determine what this is safely, I can go ahead and open a testing environment here. So this is going to spin up a brand new virtual machine hosted by ThreatLocker, not on Aubrey's machine, not on any user's machine here. It's going to be a nice safe sandbox to run this file in first, but it's not just going to be an empty sandbox. We're actually going to have what we call our risk center embedded in this environment, which is going to scan the file that we implement in this environment here and everything that comes out of it through VirusTotal. We're also going to have canaries embedded here, and we're going to give you an alert if those are tampered with in any way, as well as our full system monitoring. So we're watching for things like network activity, registry changes, files that get created or modified. Really anything that happens here, you will be aware of. So I can simply run this Google Chrome installer, of course, expecting Google Chrome, but instead, I'm going to go ahead and receive a couple command prompt windows here, and then I'm going to get some Christmas lights at the top, which if I check these out, I can see in the system field, I now have a startup item called testvirus.bat. Not very good for a Google Chrome installer. Now, moving over to my canaries, I have some write activity. Sorry, possibly encryption on my credit card data. And then VirusTotal. So a ton of hits here on VirusTotal showing me this is not a good file. So I can go ahead and discard all this data. Oh, 1 second. Whew, sorry about that.
I'm glad you're okay.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So over here, bunch of files. I know this is bad now, so I'm simply not going to allow this file in my environment. And I can do that by discarding all of this data and this environment here. Again, never letting this file run in my user's real environment. Now, of course, if everything was all good, checked out, perfectly fine application, so everything's legitimate, I could just as easily end and capture all of this data and then deploy a policy allowing this software to run now that I know it's good. But again, I know this is bad. I'm going to simply just throw this away, keep everybody nice and safe with those main components there, application control, and just a little bit of elevation control. Now, from here, again, that's our bread and butter. One of the features that we really put on top of that is going to be our ring fencing, where we have a nice list of applications here that we trust. We want these things to be able to run in our environment, but by default, they have way too much access to the other components in our system, which is why things like Microsoft Office, we had that Felina vulnerability, 3CX, we had that supply chain attack, and then of course things built into our systems like PowerShell are able to go and be used in 87% of all those ransomware attacks because by default, all these applications can get to our other apps, they can get to our files, our registry, and the internet. Now, by default, we're going to implement a good bit of these ring fence policies to protect you from things like Office, which are able to run, which is why I'm going to be able to open this document with no problems at all. But you're going to see in this document, this is something that a lot of users would actually fall for here. Now, again, we have a lot of that user training that goes in and says, okay, I know you're going to receive something maybe from internal IT here requiring you to immediately change your password. We know those threat actors are going to try to push you with that sense of urgency here. You need to do this, you need to click a button. Now, luckily, we have that good user training there, so we're going to hover over this nice little Office reset password link and say, wait a minute, that's going to take me to PowerShell. I'm not going to click on that. But unfortunately, we have that 1% of users that's going to say, hey, I want that free gift card, I want that chicken biscuit, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that link. And what they're going to do is find out what PowerShell has waiting for them. But on this machine, I am not able to do that. And that's because PowerShell here is not able to run. Now, if we take a look at this Microsoft Office policy, what you're going to find is that while Office opened just fine, the reason PowerShell was not able to open is because I'm actually blocking access to it down here. Along with other applications, we have Windows Command Prompt, RedServe, RunDLL, a bunch of components that are built into Windows workstations and often weaponized here. So nice protection by default. But some of you might look at this list and see things like PowerShell and say, wait a minute, I thought you guys needed PowerShell to run. I thought we used it for good stuff like the automation, the scripting, the logging. And that's absolutely right. We do. However, none of your IT professionals, none of you as users will end up using things like PowerShell or Command Prompt through Microsoft Office. So we are still leaving those tools available. PowerShell is right here. It is permitted for all the great things that we can do with it. However, it is ring fenced by default because the bad guys love to use PowerShell too. So that ring fencing is going to keep you guys safe from things like this here. Now, this happens to be one of our rubber ducky scripts. So what it's going to do is it's typically going to get embedded in something like a fake USB drive or an iPhone charger cable that can just be left in a parking lot. Somebody picks it up thinking, oh, perfect, a brand new, fresh iPhone charger cable. I know those things like to short out anyways, so you probably need a new one. So you grab it, first thing you do, plug it into your work computer, plug your phone in, phone starts charging. It's going to act exactly like a normal cable, except now it's going to go ahead and launch this script, which opens up PowerShell, uses PowerShell here to create a Google Cloud Storage location, and then starts exfiltrating or stealing all of the data that can be accessed through that endpoint. Network shares, local files, whatever you as a user have access to is now being stolen in the background and sent to the bad guys. Now, not only does this happen in the background, but typically your AVs, your EDRs, your antivirus, your endpoint detection and response tools, they're just going to kick back and watch this happen. And that's because nothing inherently bad is going on here. Your endpoint is just simply having a nice chit chat with Google, and it's only using PowerShell, a tool built into your machine, not a bad guy, not a weapon, not a tool that your EDRs and AVs are going to look for. However, if we check our blocked items list here, you're going to see a good bit of PowerShell entries here. And we can see that PowerShell is actually being ring fenced, meaning again, we did not take PowerShell away. It's still there, it's still able to do its job. However, it was trying to do some things that we did not want to let it do here. So if we scroll down, you'll see again, we are blocking interaction with other apps, just BitLocker, Internet Explorer, VSS Admin, some things we definitely don't want PowerShell getting to. But we're also blocking PowerShell's access to your files. So now PowerShell can't just reach in and grab whatever data it wants from your environment. So those bad guys can't just go grab your backups, your important files. And then from there, we're also blocking access to the internet, again, by default. So even if a malicious script does run in your environment, it says, hey, tool, PowerShell, go grab all these backups I found and then send them to my server so I can ransom them later. Or if a weaponized application, something comes in, supply chain attack, and says, hey, PowerShell, go download the rest of that attack, go download my payload from that server, and then start attacking these machines. PowerShell is going to say, what servers are you talking about? Because it's not able to access the internet to fulfill those malicious requests. But again, we like to make the implementation of this easy. So not only do we build these policies for you by default, we also, during learning mode, learn what you're already accessing. So if you're reaching out to Logitech for updates of your devices, Microsoft Teams, we'll learn that, exclude it for you, and let you guys continue to utilize PowerShell as a tool instead of a weapon. So that is going to be that ring fencing component there. That's going to add the cherry on top to that allow listing. Again, keeping your good apps good. And then from there, we're really just going to keep on expanding that least privilege access principle there. So we're going to go through things like our network control, where again, we're going to give you the visibility in the unified audit. And this is more on the IT side here, just giving that visibility, letting them know what's going on in the environment, and then also giving them the ability over here to set up policies. Again, sticking with least privilege access, only allowing things that need to be allowed in the environment. So in this example, I like to use RDP, remote desktop here, something that people might have open in their environments on their servers here, allowing people in. Well, you don't want to allow everyone into these ports. A lot of these things are internet facing, so the bad guys are constantly trying to attack your resources here, and we're going to make sure they're not able to get in, as you can see right here. Now, of course, with something like this, we do want to let the good guys in. You guys will actually need to access your resources. So for things like that, all we have to do is simply set up a policy, which used to be very hard to do something like implement these controls at the firewall level of your devices. Techs would typically have to go in and spend a bunch of time blowing up, opening those firewalls for a specific list of IP addresses here on each and every machine. And then they'd have to go in and say, I only want to open maybe the 3389 port for RDP here for this list permanently. And that list could get pretty cumbersome as there's more and more IPs to add. Well, we want to make things easy and effective. So instead of going to every single endpoint here, we simply deploy a policy at the server's level saying, I would like it if this port was open, but only open for my protected devices here, which I can say specific endpoints, but I also don't have to get that granular. Maybe I want to let all of my ThreatLocker protected workstations access my resources as they should be able to. And once I've deployed that policy successfully there, all of my users that are on the approved list will then be able to instantly log in and access those resources. But even better, since this is a dynamic access control list here, those users are able to not only log in from wherever, but once they're done, they can disconnect and we're going to close those ports right back up. So we're reducing your attack surface constantly, making sure you're not always vulnerable so that when you're not using those resources are not able to be used at all. Now, again, we're just going to keep pushing this on. So we have our storage control right here, another component that's going to give you visibility first in the unified audit. It's going to give you that ability to see all of the reads, writes, movement, deletion of data so we can make sure nothing bad is happening and have an audit trail just in case someone maybe does something they shouldn't. But from here, we're also going to have our controls, which at the bottom, policies that come baked in, just giving us visibility. But then up top, some more specific policies that were built to give some additional protection, like our public share policy here, where my user Bob has access to this public share. He can go in, take a look at all these documents here. I can even go in, open up my little demo document here just fine. Office is allowed to run, and Bob can get to these files. But what I'm also going to do is go to that same document and open it with something else that I know is allowed to run on this machine, which is Notepad++. Perfectly fine application here, and I'm going to go ahead, try to open that document. You see my application opens just fine. However, my document does not. And that's because if we take a look at my public share policy here, what you'll notice is that while I'm permitting reads and writes for every single file in this directory, I'm also limiting that access to just the following programs here, where I have things like Explorer, I have all my Office tools here, because I want my users to be able to see the files they have permissions to access. And then I also want to make sure, since I'm only going to have Office files in this share here, that only my Office applications can access those files there. So again, just pushing that least privilege access, inherently blocking things like ransomware, malware, weaponized applications from getting to files that they should have never had access to in the first place. Because by default, Windows is going to say, well, I see that you have this backup share map to your server. I see that you have this QuickBooks share map to your accountant's machine here. And I know users will need to get to these files. So I'm going to allow them to get to these files with any piece of software on this machine, which that's not really going to help us. I've never used Spotify to get to a QuickBooks Workbooks file. I don't need PowerShell and Command Prompt having unlimited access to my backups or really any of my data here. So I can make a very, very simple policy which blocks even things like users from poking around, deleting, moving, encrypting any of my backups here by simply only allowing my backup tool to get to my backups. And again, the implementation is incredibly easy. We go in, we hit a simple button to auto-populate what has already been looking at these files, and I can subtract from that list, leaving only the things that should be touching your data as the things that have access to it. So as I said, really all of these controls here are just pushing that zero trust paradigm, making sure that only the things that you need running, only the things that you need having access to your files or your network have that access, and blocking everything else by default. And that is ThreatLocker. So at this point, I'd like to hand it back off to Aubrey, but thank you again for having me and letting me present.
Yes, thank you so much, Deshaun. I appreciate that. So ThreatLocker is one of our vendors here at CyberTools, and we do deploy this across our tenants that use it and use it to help protect the environments from those unwanted files and PowerShell commands being run. We've had great success with stopping ransomware attacks and things like that using the product, and we'd love to open it up if anybody has any questions. There is a question and answer section here that you can put a question in, and we would love to answer anything you guys would like to know more about. Bill, will you let me know if you see any questions come in there?
I will.
Great. All right. It looks like we have a question here. Can you tell us how disruptive this could end up being to a user who's working on a weekend or in the off hours if they need access to a program?
Yeah, so it's typically not going to be disruptive at all because we have so many ways of approving. And I'm going to assume we're talking about a user that needs to run something new in their environment on the weekend. So
Yes.
for that, we actually do have a cyber hero management program, which essentially allows our technicians that work 24/7 to be able to respond to any request. So as long as it's reasonable, as long as it is something that would be approved in the environment anyways, we make that incredibly easy for it to get permitted when it needs to be.
Great. Thank you, Deshaun. All right. Well, I think that concludes our demonstration of what we refer to as zero trust, only trusting in the network what is allowed and keeping everything else out. Another one of the tactics we're using to keep ahead in that game of cat and mouse that we play with the bad actors all the time. And I really appreciate you coming today, Deshaun, to show us how it works and give everybody a little bit more information.
No problem. Again, thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.